The day it all began started like any other in our quaint little town of Millbrook. The sun peeked through the lace curtains of our Victorian-style home, casting intricate shadows on the worn hardwood floors. I remember the gentle creaking of the old house settling, a sound I'd grown accustomed to over the years. Little did I know that this ordinary Tuesday would mark the beginning of an extraordinary chain of events. I'm Sarah, by the way. 17, awkward, and perpetually feeling like I don't quite fit in my own skin, let alone in this patchwork family of mine. My dad remarried a few years back, and suddenly I found myself with a stepmother, Linda, and a stepsister, Megan. Talk about your classic fairy tale setup, right? Except in this version, there's no fairy godmother or glass slipper, just a whole lot of uncomfortable silences and forced smiles. That afternoon, I was curled up in the window seat of my room, nose buried in a dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice. It was my escape, my little rebellion against the modern world with its smartphones and social media drama. The gentle tapping on my door pulled me reluctantly from the world of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. "Sarah? May I come in?" It was Linda's voice, soft and tentative as always. I sighed, dog-earing my page, a habit that would make any librarian cringe. "Sure, come in," I called out, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. It wasn't that I hated Linda. Hate is such a strong word. It's just that every interaction with her felt like navigating a minefield, never knowing if I'd say the wrong thing and set off an explosion of awkwardness. The door creaked open, another sound I'd grown used to in this old house, and Linda stepped in. She was wearing one of her flowery dresses, the kind that always made me think of wallpaper in an old lady's house. But today, something was different. In her hands, she held a delicate porcelain teacup, steam rising from its contents in lazy swirls. "I thought you might like some tea," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. There was something in her expression, nervousness, anticipation, that set my nerves on edge. I sat up, swinging my legs off the window seat. "Oh, thanks," I mumbled, reaching out to take the cup. As my fingers wrapped around the warm porcelain, a scent hit my nostrils that made me pause. It wasn't the comforting aroma of Earl Grey or the fruity notes of berry tea. This was different, exotic, almost otherworldly. The smell tickled something in the back of my mind, a half-forgotten memory or perhaps a dream. It was spicy and sweet, with an underlying earthiness that made me think of hidden forest groves and moonlit rituals. I looked up at Linda, a question forming on my lips, but the words died as I saw the intensity in her gaze. "It's a special blend," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For you, my dear. I think you'll find it enlightening." The way she said enlightening sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't the first time Linda had tried to connect with me through little gifts or gestures, but this felt different. There was a weight to this moment, a significance that I couldn't quite grasp but could definitely feel. I brought the cup closer to my face, the steam warming my cheeks. The scent grew stronger, more intoxicating. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw shapes in the swirling vapor, fleeting images of faces and places I didn't recognize. "What's in it?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. Linda's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, just a mix of herbs and spices. An old family recipe. It's good for clarity." Clarity. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with unspoken meanings. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. Linda watched me for a moment longer, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Enjoy it, Sarah. And pay attention to how it makes you feel." With that cryptic remark, she was gone, leaving me alone with the mysterious tea and a growing sense of unease. I stared at the liquid in the cup, its color a deep, rich amber that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light. Part of me wanted to dump it out the window, to pretend this strange interaction had never happened. But another part, a part one didn't quite understand, was curious, intrigued, maybe even a little excited. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Then, before I could change my mind, I took a sip. The flavor exploded on my tongue, a complex symphony of tastes I couldn't begin to identify. It was sweet and bitter, spicy and soothing all at once. As I swallowed, I felt a warmth spreading through my body, starting in my chest and radiating outward to my fingertips and toes. And then, the room began to change. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, no walls melting or furniture coming to life. Instead, it was as if someone had adjusted the contrast and sharpness of the world around me. Colors became more vivid, edges more defined. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to dance and pulse with a life of its own. I blinked hard, shaking my head. What was happening to me? Was this some kind of hallucination? I set the cup down on my bedside table with trembling hands, suddenly afraid of what I'd just consumed. As I tried to make sense of the shifting reality around me, memories began to surface, vivid flashes of moments I'd long forgotten or tried to suppress. I saw myself as a little girl, laughing as my dad pushed me on a swing. I relived the day of my mom's funeral, the crushing weight of grief and confusion. I watched as if from a distance as a younger version of myself met Linda and Megan for the first time, the awkwardness and tension palpable even in this strange, dreamlike state. But it wasn't just my own memories I was experiencing. Somehow, impossibly, I was seeing glimpses of other lives, other times. A woman in old-fashioned clothes tending an herb garden. A man hunched over a desk, scribbling furiously in a leather-bound book. A group of people gathered in a forest clearing, their faces illuminated by firelight as they chanted words I couldn't understand, but somehow felt I should know. Through it all, one image kept repeating, a symbol, a sort of spiral with strange markings around its edges. It appeared in the woman's garden, etched into the plants. It was stamped on the cover of the man's book. And in the forest scene, it was drawn on the ground in what looked disturbingly like blood. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in this kaleidoscope of visions and memories. It could have been minutes or hours. When I finally came back to myself, the room was dark, the sun having set without me noticing. The teacup sat innocently on my bedside table, empty now except for a few dark leaves clinging to the bottom. My head was pounding and my mouth felt dry. But more than any physical discomfort, I felt changed. As if the tea had peeled back a layer of reality I hadn't known existed, showing me glimpses of a world beyond the ordinary one I thought I knew. I stumbled to my feet, my legs weak and shaky. I needed answers. What had Linda given me? What did it all mean? And most importantly, why me? As I reached for the doorknob, intent on finding Linda and demanding an explanation, a new thought struck me. My stepsister, Megan. Always so perfect, so favored. What if the tea had originally been meant for her? The idea took root in my mind, growing and branching out with dizzying speed. I leaned against the door, my heart racing. If the tea was meant for Megan, then by giving it to me, Linda had made a choice. But was it a choice in my favor, or was I just a test subject for something intended for her precious daughter? The questions swirled in my mind, mixing with the lingering images from my visions. One thing was clear. Nothing would be the same after this. I had been given a gift, yes, but it was an unsettling one. A gift that came with strings attached, with mysteries to unravel and truths to uncover. As I stood there in the darkness of my room, caught between the familiar world of my everyday life and the strange new reality the tea had revealed, I made a decision. I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Because one thing was certain, in this game of secrets and hidden truths, I refused to be just a pawn. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, ready to face whatever came next. The unsettling gift had set me on a new path, and there was no turning back now. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel, the shadows dancing on the walls as I made my way downstairs. My mind was still reeling from the effects of the tea, each step feeling like I was moving through a dream. But I had to focus. I needed answers, and I knew just where to start. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard voices drifting from the living room. One was unmistakably Megan's. My stepsister's laugh could cut through steel. The other was Linda's, softer, but with an underlying tension I'd never noticed before. I paused, pressing myself against the wall, and listened. Sure it was the right decision? Megan was saying, her voice tinged with doubt. We had no choice, Linda replied. It's time she knew. Besides, your father. They fell silent as I accidentally creaked a floorboard. Cursing inwardly, I took a deep breath and stepped into the living room, trying to look as normal as possible. Which, given the circumstances, was about as easy as trying to look casual while juggling flaming torches. Oh, Sarah. Linda's voice was overly bright. How are you feeling, dear? Did you enjoy the tea? I looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time. The lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched a throw pillow. She was nervous. Good. It was interesting, I said carefully, watching their reactions. Strong flavor. Almost magical, you could say. Megan snorted, but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with her mother. Magic? Come on, Sarah. It's just tea, not some Harry Potter potion. But I saw the lie in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She knew something, and she was scared I'd figured it out. That's when I made a decision. A reckless, possibly stupid decision, but one that felt right in that moment of clarity the tea had given me. I turned to Linda, forcing a smile. Actually, I was wondering if I could have another cup. It was so refreshing. Linda's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then she nodded, almost eagerly. Of course, dear. I'll go prepare some more. Megan, would you like a cup as well? Megan hesitated, then shrugged. Sure, why not? If it's good enough for Sarah, I guess I should try it too. As Linda hurried off to the kitchen, I sank into an armchair, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I just had to wait for the right moment. Megan eyed me suspiciously from the couch. So, what's the deal, Sarah? Since when are you all buddy-buddy with Mom? I shrugged, trying to channel my inner cool cucumber. Can't a girl enjoy a cup of tea with her family? Megan's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Linda returned, carrying a tray with 3 steaming cups. She set it down on the coffee table, her hands shaking slightly as she handed us each a cup. Here you are, girls. Enjoy. I watched as Megan took her cup, sniffing it cautiously. Linda settled into her chair, picking up her own cup, but not drinking, her eyes darting between us. This was it. My moment. Oh, Linda, I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. I just remembered I left my phone upstairs. Would you mind grabbing it for me? I'm expecting an important call. Linda hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave us alone. But social niceties won out, and she nodded. Of course, dear. I'll be right back. The moment she left the room, I sprang into action. With a quick movement that surprised even myself, I swapped my cup with Megan's. Megan blinked, startled. What the hell, Sarah? I shrugged, trying to look nonchalant even as my heart raced. Sorry, I thought I saw a bug in mine. Guess I was wrong. She rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like drama queen. But she didn't switch the cups back, which was all that mattered. Linda returned a moment later, my phone in hand. Here you go, Sarah. No missed calls, though. I thanked her, pocketing the phone and picking up my cup, the one that had originally been Megan's. We sat in uncomfortable silence, sipping our tea. I watched Megan over the rim of my cup, waiting for any sign that she was experiencing the same strange effects I had earlier. But nothing happened. No widened eyes, no gasps of surprise. Just Megan, drinking her tea and scrolling through her phone with her usual look of bored disdain. As the minutes ticked by, I felt a growing sense of unease. Had I been wrong? Was it all in my head? Or worse, had Linda somehow known I would try to switch the cups? I finished my tea, the taste bitter in my mouth. Whatever I had experienced earlier, whatever insights or visions I'd had, they didn't come this time. I felt normal, frustratingly, disappointingly normal. Well, this has been fun, Megan said sarcastically, standing up. But unlike some people, I actually have a social life to attend to. Later, losers. As she sauntered out of the room, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flicker of triumph. She paused at the door, turning back with a smirk. Oh, and Sarah? Next time you want to play tea party, try not to be so obvious about it." With that parting shot, she was gone, leaving me alone with Linda and a sinking feeling in my stomach. Linda cleared her throat, her voice gentle but firm. "Sarah, I think we need to talk." I nodded, resigned. "Yeah, I guess we do." She leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "The tea, it affected you, didn't it? You saw things." I hesitated, then nodded again. There was no point in denying it now. Linda sighed, a mix of relief and worry crossing her face. "I wasn't sure it would work. You see, Sarah, there's something you need to know about our family, about your mother and the legacy she left behind." As Linda began to speak, weaving a tale of ancient traditions, hidden powers, and family secrets, I felt my world shifting once again. The swap might not have gone as planned, but it had set in motion events that would change everything. I listened, my mind racing to keep up with the revelations. Apparently, the women in our family, my mother's side, had always possessed a certain sensitivity. The ability to see beyond the veil of ordinary reality, to tap into energies most people couldn't even imagine. The tea was a catalyst, a way to awaken those dormant abilities. But why now? I asked, interrupting Linda's explanation. "Why give it to me today?" Linda's expression grew somber. "Because, Sarah, there's a storm coming. Something dark is stirring, and we need you. Your father and we've been trying to protect you, to give you a normal life. But we can't hide from this any longer." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Normal? Is that what you call this? The awkward family dinners, the constant tension? Was any of it real?" Linda reached out, taking my hand in hers. To my surprise, I didn't pull away. "All of it was real, Sarah. The love, the struggles, that's what family is. But there's more to our story, more than we ever wanted to burden you with." As she continued to explain, pieces started falling into place. The strange books I'd sometimes glimpsed in my father's study, the hushed conversations that would stop when I entered a room. Even Megan's attitude towards me, it wasn't just typical stepsister rivalry. She was jealous, afraid of the power she knew I might one day possess. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice small in the face of these overwhelming revelations. Linda squeezed my hand. "Now we prepare. We train you to use your gifts, to understand the responsibility that comes with them. And we face whatever's coming together." As I sat there, trying to process everything, a thought struck me. Wait, what about the cup I switched with Megan's? Why didn't I feel anything this time? A small smile played on Linda's lips. "Oh, Sarah, did you really think we wouldn't anticipate something like that? The second cup was just normal tea. A test of sorts. And you passed." I stared at her, a mix of emotions swirling inside me, anger at being manipulated, grudging respect for their foresight, and an overwhelming sense of belonging. For the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. As the evening wore on and Linda continued to fill in the gaps of our family history, I found myself thinking about Megan, about the look in her eyes as she left the room. There was more to her story, I was sure of it. And I was determined to find out what it was. The calculated swap might not have gone as planned, but it had set me on a path I could never have imagined. A path of discovery, danger, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to truly understand my place in this strange, magical world. As I finally headed up to bed that night, my head spinning with all I'd learned, I paused at my bedroom door. The house felt different now, alive with secrets and possibilities. I took a deep breath, feeling the energy humming beneath my skin. Whatever was coming, whatever dark force Linda had hinted at, I would be ready. Because now I knew the truth. I wasn't just Sarah, the awkward stepdaughter. I was Sarah, heir to a legacy of power and mystery. And I was just getting started. After the whirlwind of revelations from Linda, I retreated to my room, my mind buzzing with questions and possibilities. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, its deep, resonant tones echoing through the house. I had 3 hours until midnight, 3 hours to prepare for whatever might come next. I paced the length of my room, from the window seat where I'd first sipped the mysterious tea to the old oak dresser that had been my mother's. Each step felt charged with a new awareness, as if the very floorboards beneath my feet were alive with hidden energies. "Okay, Sarah," I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair. "You've just found out you're part of some magical legacy. No big deal. Totally normal Tuesday night." But despite my attempts at sarcasm, I couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation building in my chest. Something was coming. Linda had made that clear. But what? And more importantly, would I be ready for it? I flopped onto my bed, staring up at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on my ceiling years ago. They seemed different now, their soft green glow pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Was this part of my newfound sensitivity, or just my imagination working overtime? The first hour crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through social media feeds that suddenly seemed trivial and disconnected from the reality I now inhabited. How many of these people, I wondered, had any idea of the hidden world existing alongside their ordinary lives? As the clock struck 10, a new sensation began to creep over me. It started as a tingling in my fingertips, a gentle warmth that spread up my arms and into my chest. I sat up, alarmed at first, but then oddly calm. This feeling, it was familiar somehow, like a half-remembered dream. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation. In my mind's eye, I saw flashes of images, a dense forest, moonlight filtering through leaves, the glint of metal in candlelight. Were these memories? Visions of the future? Or something else entirely? The second hour brought with it a cascade of emotions that weren't entirely my own. Joy, fear, anger, love, they washed over me in waves, each one distinct yet somehow interconnected. I found myself laughing one moment and fighting back tears the next, my body a conduit for feelings that seemed to span generations. In one particularly intense moment, I felt a surge of love so powerful it took my breath away. With it came an image of a woman who looked startlingly like me, but older, her eyes filled with a wisdom and strength I could only hope to possess one day. Mom, I realized with a start. This was how she felt about me. The emotion was quickly followed by a pang of loss so acute it made me gasp. I curled up on my bed, hugging my knees to my chest as I rode out the wave of grief. It wasn't just my loss I was feeling, I realized, but the collective sorrow of all the women in my family line who had come before me. As the clock struck 11, marking the beginning of the third hour, the physical and emotional sensations began to subside, replaced by a clarity of thought I'd never experienced before. Ideas and connections formed in my mind with lightning speed, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed falling into place. I grabbed a notebook from my desk and began to write, my pen flying across the page as I jotted down everything that came to me. Symbols, phrases and languages I didn't recognize, diagrams of energy flows, they poured out of me in a torrent of inspiration. One symbol, in particular, kept recurring, the spiral with strange markings that I'd seen in my earlier visions. I drew it over and over, each iteration more detailed than the last. There was power in the symbol, I knew instinctively. But what kind of power? And how was I supposed to use it? As I worked, I became aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the house. The air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing indoors. I paused in my writing, listening intently. From downstairs, I could hear muffled voices, Linda and my father, their tones urgent, but too low for me to make out the words. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside my room. Megan, I thought, picturing my stepsister pressing her ear to my door, trying to eavesdrop. But the footsteps moved on, fading away towards the attic stairs. What was she up to? I glanced at the clock, 11:45. 15 minutes left until, what exactly? The end of this strange initiation? The beginning of something even more extraordinary? I had no idea, but the anticipation was almost unbearable. I returned to my notebook, flipping through the pages I'd filled. The writings and drawings looked alien to me now, as if they'd been produced by someone else entirely. But I knew, deep in my bones, that they held importance, keys to understanding the power that was awakening inside me. At 11:55, a knock at my door made me jump. Sarah. It was my father's voice, tentative and tinged with worry. Can I come in? I hesitated for a moment, then called out, "Yeah, Dad, it's open." He entered slowly, his eyes taking in the scattered papers on my bed, the wild look I'm sure I had in my eyes. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. "Oh, just peachy. Finding out I'm part of some magical family legacy, experiencing visions and emotions spanning generations. Totally normal stuff." Dad winced, sitting down on the edge of my bed. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. We wanted to tell you sooner, but we hoped we could protect you from all this." "Protect me?" I asked, a spark of anger flaring up. "By keeping me in the dark? By making me feel like an outsider in my own family?" He reached out, taking my hand in his. The touch sent a jolt through me, not the strange, mystical energy I'd been experiencing, but the simple, grounding connection of family, of love. "You're right," he said softly. "We made mistakes, but everything we did out of love for you. And now?" He glanced at the clock. 11:59. "Now it's time for you to know everything." As if on cue, the house began to vibrate with a low, thrumming energy. The air in my room shimmered, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. Dad squeezed my hand tighter. "Whatever happens, Sarah, remember this. You are stronger than you know. And we are all here for you." The clock struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the house with an otherworldly resonance. Each toll seemed to pierce through me, unlocking something deep inside. With the final chime, everything went still. The shimmering air, the vibrations, even the usual creaks and settles of the old house, all fell silent. For a moment, I thought that was it, that whatever was supposed to happen had fizzled out like a dud firecracker. But then I felt it, a surge of power unlike anything I'd experienced before. It started in my core and radiated outward, filling every cell of my body with light and energy. I gasped, my back arching as the power flowed through me. Dimly, I was aware of my father calling my name, of Linda bursting into the room, of Megan watching wide-eyed from the doorway. But they seemed distant, unimportant compared to the transformation taking place within me. In that moment of transcendence, I saw it all, the unbroken line of women stretching back through time, each one a keeper of the power I now felt coursing through my veins. I saw the challenges they had faced, the sacrifices they had made, the love that had sustained them through it all. And I saw what was coming, the darkness Linda had hinted at, a malevolent force that sought to extinguish the light we carried. But I also saw hope, in myself, in my family, in the strength we could wield when united. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded. I slumped back onto the bed, exhausted but exhilarated. The 3-hour wait was over, but I knew this was just the beginning. I looked up at my family gathered around me, Dad with his worry and love, Linda with her knowing smile, even Megan with her mix of awe and jealousy. For the first time in years, I felt truly connected to them all. "So," I said, my voice hoarse but steady, "what's next?" Linda stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride and determination. "Now, Sarah, your real training begins. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, feeling the power humming just beneath my skin, waiting to be called upon. I thought of all I'd experienced in those 3 hours, the visions, the emotions, the knowledge that had poured into me. I thought of the challenges ahead, the darkness we would have to face. But most of all, I thought of the women who had come before me, their strength and courage flowing through my veins along with this newfound power. I was part of something greater than myself now, part of a legacy that stretched back through time. I met Linda's gaze, then looked at each member of my family in turn. Finally, I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's do this." As we left my room together, heading downstairs to begin whatever came next, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. The 3-hour wait had changed everything, opening my eyes to a world of possibilities I never could have imagined. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever darkness we would have to face, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer just Sarah, the awkward teenager trying to find her place. I was Sarah, heir to a powerful legacy, protector of an ancient light. And I was just getting started. The days following my midnight awakening were a whirlwind of activity and discovery. My normal routine of school, homework, and awkward family dinners was replaced by an intensive crash course in what Linda called the family business. As it turned out, that business was a lot more complicated and dangerous than I could have imagined. Our living room became a makeshift classroom, with ancient tomes replacing textbooks and crystals standing in for calculators. Linda took on the role of primary instructor, her normally soft-spoken demeanor giving way to the authoritative tone of a seasoned teacher. "The power you've awakened, Sarah," she explained one afternoon as we sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by flickering candles, "is both a gift and a responsibility. It connects you to the very fabric of reality, allowing you to see and manipulate energies that most people can't even perceive." I nodded, trying to absorb the information. "But why me? Why our family?" Linda's eyes took on a distant look. "That's a question our ancestors have been asking for generations. The truth is, we don't know for certain. Some say we're descended from an ancient line of priestesses. Others believe we were chosen by forces beyond our understanding. What matters is how we use this gift." As the days passed, I began to grasp the basics of what Linda called energy work. It started with simple exercises, feeling the flow of power within my own body, then extending my awareness to the energies around me. I learned to see the subtle auras surrounding people and objects, each one a unique fingerprint of color and vibration. But it wasn't all meditation and theory. To my surprise, Dad took charge of the more physical aspects of my training. Years of thinking of him as just a mild-mannered history professor went out the window the first time he demonstrated a series of martial arts moves with a grace and power I'd never seen in him before. "Balance of mind, body, and spirit," he said, helping me up after I'd fallen for the umpteenth time trying to mimic his movements. "That's the key, Sarah. The power within you is incredible, but without control, it's as dangerous to you as it is to any enemy." Enemy. The word hung in the air, a reminder of the ominous warnings about the darkness that was coming. Despite my persistent questions, both Dad and Linda remained frustratingly vague about the exact nature of this threat. "You're not ready to face it yet," Linda would say, her voice gentle but firm. "Focus on your training. Understanding will come in time." It was maddening, but I tried to trust in their guidance. After all, they'd been dealing with this stuff a lot longer than I had. Megan, for her part, oscillated between sullen resentment and burning curiosity about my training. I'd catch her lingering in doorways during my lessons, her expression a mix of envy and fascination. Part of me wanted to include her, to share this strange new world I was discovering. But another part, the part that remembered years of snide comments and put-downs, held back. One evening, about a week into my crash course in all things mystical, I was in my room practicing a meditation technique Linda had taught me. The goal was to extend my awareness beyond the confines of my physical body, to see with senses beyond the ordinary five. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breath, feeling the energy flowing through me. Gradually, I felt my consciousness expanding, pushing outward like ripples in a pond. I could sense the familiar contours of my room, then beyond, the hallway, the stairs, the rest of the house spreading out in my mind's eye. And then, something strange happened. As my awareness brushed against the walls of my father's study, I felt resistance. It was as if there was a bubble of energy surrounding the room, pushing back against my psychic probe. My eyes snapped open, heart racing. What was that? In all our lessons, Linda had never mentioned anything like this. Curiosity overrode caution, and I found myself creeping down the hallway towards Dad's study. The door was closed, as usual. It was his private space, off limits without permission. But now, standing before it, I could feel the energy pulsing behind the wood, like a living thing. I raised my hand, not quite touching the door, and concentrated. The resistance I'd felt earlier was still there, but now that I was focusing on it, I could see it more clearly in my mind. It was a web of energy, intricate and purposeful. A shield, I realized. But shielding what? Ahem. I jumped, spinning around to find Megan standing at the end of the hallway, arms crossed and eyebrow raised. "Jeez, Megan. Make some noise next time, why don't you?" I hissed, my heart pounding. She smirked, sauntering closer. Sneaking around, Sarah? I thought you were supposed to be the chosen one or whatever. Isn't that against the rules? I bristled at her tone, but tried to keep my cool. I'm not sneaking. I'm practicing. Megan's eyes flicked to the study door, then back to me. You felt it too, didn't you? The weird energy coming from in there. I blinked, surprised. Wait, you can sense that? She shrugged, but I could see the excitement she was trying to hide. Maybe. I've been paying attention during your little magic lessons, you know. Picked up a few things. For a moment, we just looked at each other, years of rivalry and misunderstanding hanging between us. Then, slowly, I nodded. Yeah, I felt it. It's like a shield or something. But I don't know why it's there or what it's hiding. Megan glanced up and down the hallway, then leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Want to find out? I hesitated. Every lesson so far had emphasized the importance of control, of not using these newfound abilities recklessly. But the mystery of what lay behind that door pulled at me, an itch I couldn't ignore. Okay, I said finally. But we have to be careful. If Mom and Dad catch us. Relax, Megan said with a grin that was equal parts excitement and mischief. They're out for the evening, remember? Dad's lecture at the university, Mom's book club. We've got at least a couple of hours. I nodded, turning back to the door. All right, here goes nothing. Closing my eyes, I focused on the energy shield I'd sensed earlier. In my mind, I visualized it as a net of glowing threads. Carefully, gently, I began to probe for weak spots, places where the threads were thinner or less tightly woven. It was slow, painstaking work. More than once, I felt the shield push back against my efforts, nearly breaking my concentration. But finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I found it, a small gap in the energy net. With a final push of will, I widened the gap, creating a hole just big enough to reach through psychically. I think I've got it, I murmured to Megan. Can you turn the doorknob? I heard her move past me, then the soft click of the latch. The door swung open, and the energy shield dissolved like mist in sunlight. We stepped into the study, and I opened my eyes, blinking in the dim light. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Bookshelves lining the walls, Dad's big oak desk dominating the center of the room. But then I saw it. On the desk, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight from the window, lay an ancient-looking book. Its cover was made of worn leather, etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer and move in the faint light. And at the center of the cover was the spiral symbol I'd seen in my visions, the one I'd drawn over and over in my notebook. Whoa, Megan breathed beside me. What is that? I shook my head, moving closer to the desk. I don't know, but I've seen that symbol before, in my visions. As I reached out to touch the book, a jolt of energy surged through me. Images flashed through my mind, a moonlit clearing, a circle of robed figures, a beam of light piercing the night sky. And through it all, a sense of urgency, of impending danger. I snatched my hand back, gasping. Megan grabbed my arm, steadying me. Sarah? What's wrong? What did you see? Before I could answer, we heard the front door open downstairs. Dad's voice drifted up, followed by Linda's. They were home early. Panic surged through me. Quick, I hissed to Megan. We've got to get out of here. We scrambled out of the study, Megan pulling the door shut behind us as I frantically tried to reconstruct the energy shield. I managed something that felt close to the original, praying it would be enough to fool Dad if he checked. We made it back to our rooms just as footsteps sounded on the stairs. Collapsing onto my bed, heart racing, I tried to make sense of what we'd discovered. The book, the visions, the sense of looming threat, it all swirled in my mind, pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. One thing was clear, though. The mystery surrounding our family, my newfound powers, and the darkness Linda and Dad had warned about, it was all connected to that book. And somehow I knew that uncovering its secrets would be key to understanding my role in whatever was coming. As I lay there in the dark, replaying the events of the evening, a soft knock sounded at my door. It creaked open, and Megan poked her head in. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" I nodded, sitting up. "Yeah, just processing." She came in, closing the door behind her, and perched on the edge of my bed. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of our shared secret hanging between us. Finally, Megan spoke. "So, what do we do now?" I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. Gone was the snide, superior stepsister I'd known for years. In her place was someone who looked just as scared and overwhelmed as I felt. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever's going on, whatever that book means, I think we're in this together now." Megan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Yeah, I guess we are." As she left my room, I turned to stare out the window at the star-filled sky. The mystery was unfolding, revealing layers I never could have imagined. And somehow I knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever secrets that book held, whatever dangers lay ahead, I was determined to face them. Not just for myself, but for my family, all of my family. Because in uncovering the truth about our past, I had a feeling we'd be shaping our future. And that future, for better or worse, was starting now. The morning after our clandestine exploration of Dad's study dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tumultuous thoughts swirling in my mind. As I made my way downstairs for breakfast, the weight of our discovery sat heavy on my shoulders. The image of that ancient book, with its mysterious symbols and the spiral that had haunted my visions, was etched into my memory. The kitchen was a scene of forced normalcy. Dad was at the table, hidden behind his newspaper as usual. Linda bustled about, flipping pancakes and humming softly to herself. And Megan. Megan caught my eye as I entered, a silent exchange passing between us. We were co-conspirators now, bound by the secret of what we'd seen. "Morning, sweetheart," Linda chirped, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me. "Sleep well." I mumbled something non-committal, my mind racing. How could I sit here, pretending everything was normal, when I knew they were keeping such massive secrets from me? The urge to confront them, to demand answers, bubbled up inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. Megan must have sensed my inner turmoil because she suddenly piped up, "So, Dad, how was your lecture last night?" "Must have been a short one." Dad lowered his paper, brow furrowed. "What do you mean, short?" "Well, you guys came home way earlier than you said you would," Megan replied, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I watched as Dad and Linda exchanged a quick glance. It was brief, but in that moment, I saw something I'd never noticed before, a flicker of worry, of silent communication born from years of shared secrets. "Oh, that," Linda said, her laugh a touch too high. "The lecture was canceled at the last minute. Scheduling mix-up. We thought we'd surprise you girls by coming home early." The lie hung in the air, as palpable as the scent of pancakes and coffee. I couldn't take it anymore. "Stop," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Just stop." All eyes turned to me. Dad set down his paper, Linda froze mid-pancake flip, and Megan just watched, her expression a mix of anticipation and fear. "Sarah," Dad's voice was gentle, probing. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "The book in your study, Dad. The one with the spiral symbol on the cover." "What is it?" The effect was immediate. Linda dropped the spatula with a clatter. Dad's face drained of color. And in that moment, I knew we had stumbled onto something big. "How did you?" Dad began, then shook his head. "Never mind. I should have known we couldn't keep this from you forever. Keep it from me," I demanded, my voice rising. "You've been training me, telling me about this power, this legacy. But you're still hiding things. Big things. Why?" Linda moved to Dad's side, her hand on his shoulder. "We were trying to protect you, Sarah. Both of you," she added, glancing at Megan. "There are things, dangerous things, that we hoped you'd never have to face. But we will have to face them, won't we?" I pressed. "This darkness you keep hinting at, it's real, isn't it? And it's coming." Dad nodded slowly. "Yes, it's real. And yes, it's coming. But Sarah, you have to understand, we wanted you to be ready. to be strong enough to handle the truth. "I'm ready now," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "No more secrets. No more half-truths. Tell us everything." For a long moment, silence reigned in the kitchen. Then, with a heavy sigh, Dad stood. "All right, but not here. This is a conversation for the study." As we filed out of the kitchen and up the stairs, I felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. I was finally going to get answers, but would I like what I heard? The study looked different in the morning light, less mysterious, more lived in. But the energy was still there, a subtle hum that I could feel in my bones. Dad moved behind his desk, running his hand over the ancient book that had sparked this confrontation. "This," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of history, "is the Codex Umbra. It's been in our family for generations, passed down from mother to daughter along with the power you've begun to awaken, Sarah." "But I'm not." I began, glancing at Linda. She smiled softly. "Blood isn't everything, dear. The power chose you, just as it chose me when I married your father. Family is more than genetics." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. Despite everything, despite the secrets and the lies, I felt a surge of love for this woman who had taken on the mantle of motherhood with such grace. "The Codex," Dad continued, "contains the collected wisdom and warnings of our ancestors. Spells, prophecies, accounts of battles fought in secret against forces that most of humanity never even knew existed." "Forces like what?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad's expression darkened. "There are beings, entities, that exist in the spaces between our world and others. Some are benign, some indifferent. But others hunger for our world, for the life force of humanity. We call them the Umbra." "The darkness," I murmured, remembering Linda's warnings. "Yes," Linda nodded. "For centuries, our family has stood as a bulwark against their incursions. The power you possess, Sarah, is meant to seal the breaches between worlds, to push back the darkness when it threatens to overwhelm the light." My head was spinning. It was one thing to learn about energy manipulation and auras. It was another entirely to hear that I was meant to be some kind of interdimensional warrior. "But why now?" I asked. "Why all this training, all this urgency?" Dad and Linda exchanged another of those loaded glances. Finally, Dad spoke. "Because the barriers are weakening. We've known it was coming for some time. The signs have been there, for those who know how to read them. But recently, things have accelerated. The Umbra are growing stronger," Linda added. "Bolder. There have been sightings, incidents, nothing the general public would notice, but for those of us who are sensitive to such things, it's like a storm gathering on the horizon." I sank into a chair, trying to process it all. Part of me wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some elaborate fantasy. But I couldn't deny the power I'd felt, the visions I'd seen. This was real, as impossible as it seemed. "So what do we do?" I asked, looking up at my parents, my guardians, my teachers. "We prepare," Dad said simply. "We train. And when the time comes, we fight." "We," Megan repeated, emphasizing the word. "Does that include me?" "I'm not. I don't have the power Sarah does." Linda moved to her, taking her hands. "Oh, sweetheart. You have your own strength, your own role to play. The Codex speaks of guardians and guides, of those who support and protect the wielders of power. That's you, Megan. You're as much a part of this as any of us." I watched as Megan's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief, of belonging. In that moment, I saw my stepsister in a new light. All her barbs, her competitiveness, they came from a place of fear, of feeling like an outsider in her own family. But now, we're in this together, I said, standing and moving to Megan's side. "All of us." She nodded, a watery smile on her face. "Together." Dad cleared his throat, and we all turned to him. He had opened the Codex, its pages filled with script I couldn't read and diagrams that seemed to move if I looked at them too long. "There's so much more to tell you," he said. "So much to learn. But for now, know this. The path ahead will be difficult. Dangerous. But you're not alone. You have each other, you have us, and you have the wisdom of all those who came before you." As I stood there in that study, surrounded by my family, I felt a shift in the air. The secrets that had divided us were now out in the open, and in their place was a new sense of unity, of purpose. The confrontation I'd feared had led to revelations I never could have imagined. And while part of me was terrified of what lay ahead, another part, a stronger part, was ready. Ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to face whatever darkness might come. Because now I knew the truth. I wasn't just Sarah, the awkward teenager. I was Sarah, heir to a legacy of power and protector of the world. And I had a family, a real family, standing beside me. As Dad began to explain the first of many lessons from the Codex, I exchanged a glance with Megan. The rivalry that had defined our relationship for so long was gone, replaced by a bond forged in shared secrets and common purpose. Whatever came next, whatever battles we might face, we would face them together. As a family, as guardians of the light. And in that moment, despite the weight of responsibility now resting on my shoulders, I felt stronger than I ever had before. The mystery was unfolding, the revelations changing everything I thought I knew about myself and my world. But I was ready. We were ready. Let the darkness come. We would be waiting. The days following our family's big revelation felt like living in a dream, or maybe a very strange, very intense movie. My world had been turned upside down, inside out, and shaken like a snow globe. Yet somehow, life went on. I still had to go to school, pretending to care about algebra and Shakespeare while my mind raced with thoughts of interdimensional beings and ancient family legacies. More than once, I caught myself zoning out in class, absently doodling the spiral symbol from the Codex Umbra in my notebook margins. Earth to Sarah, my friend Emily said one day at lunch, waving a hand in front of my face. "You've been weird lately. Everything okay?" I blinked, forcing myself back to the present. "Yeah, sorry. Just family stuff, you know." Emily nodded sympathetically, launching into a story about her own family drama. I listened, or tried to, but part of me couldn't help but think how trivial it all seemed compared to what I was dealing with. And immediately, I felt guilty for thinking that. Emily was my friend, and her problems were valid, even if they didn't involve battling shadow monsters from another dimension. That guilt, that sense of disconnection from my normal life, became a constant companion in those early days. I was straddling two worlds, and I wasn't sure how to reconcile them. At home, things were different. Not bad, just intense. Our house had become command central for operation. Prepare for the apocalypse, okay, maybe that was a bit dramatic, but it felt that way sometimes. Every spare moment was devoted to training, studying the Codex, or discussing strategy. Dad had taken a sabbatical from the university, citing a family emergency. In a way, I suppose that was true. Linda had put her book club on indefinite hold. And Megan and I, well, we were getting a crash course in saving the world. It was during one of these marathon study sessions, about a week after the big reveal, that I finally hit my breaking point. "I can't do this anymore." I burst out, slamming the Codex shut. The ancient book seemed to shudder, offended by my outburst. Everyone froze, staring at me. We were in the living room, books and papers spread out around us like some bizarre war room. Dad lowered the crystal he'd been using to demonstrate energy manipulation. Linda set down her notebook full of hastily scribbled translations from the Codex. And Megan just watched me, her eyes full of understanding. "Sarah," Dad began, his voice gentle. "I know this is a lot. I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "Dad, a lot is having to write a 10-page paper over the weekend. This is insane. A week ago, my biggest worry was whether Jake Sullivan was going to ask me to prom. Now I'm supposed to be some kind of chosen one, fighting off shadow monsters and saving the world." I stood up, pacing the room, words pouring out of me in a torrent. And what about my life? My friends? Am I just supposed to pretend everything's normal when I'm at school? Lie to everyone I care about? How am I supposed to have any kind of normal teenage experience when I'm spending every waking moment preparing for some cosmic battle? I stopped, breathing hard, suddenly aware of the tears streaming down my face. The room was silent, the weight of my outburst hanging in the air. Then, to my surprise, Megan stood up. "She's right," she said, moving to stand beside me. This is crazy, and it's not fair to expect us to just accept it without freaking out a little. Linda and Dad exchanged a look, one of those parent looks that seem to communicate volumes without a word. Then Linda sighed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You're both right," she said. "We've been so focused on preparing you for what's coming that we forgot something important. You're still teenagers. You need time to process, to adjust. And yes, to have some semblance of a normal life." Dad nodded, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but now recognized as a sign of stress. "We got caught up in the urgency of the situation. But burning you out won't help anyone. We need to find a balance." "Balance," I repeated, the word tasting strange on my tongue. "How do we balance saving the world with, I don't know, going to the movies or hanging out at the mall?" "Very carefully," Dad said with a wry smile. "But we'll figure it out. Together." And so began what we jokingly called Operation Normal Teenager. We set up a schedule, training and study in the mornings and evenings, but afternoons and weekends were for regular life. I went back to my after-school art club. Megan rejoined the debate team. We even had a family movie night, no talk of Umbra or interdimensional threats allowed. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, of fear about what was coming. But slowly, we started to find our new normal. One Saturday afternoon, about a month after the big revelation, Megan and I were at the mall. We'd just finished a marathon shopping session, retail therapy, Megan called it, and we're slurping oversized smoothies in the food court. "So," Megan said, fiddling with her straw wrapper, "on a scale of 1 to total mental breakdown, how are you doing with all this?" I laughed, surprised by her directness. But then, that was Megan, always cutting straight to the chase. "Honestly, some days I'm at a solid 8. Others, maybe a 3 or 4. You." She shrugged, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "About the same. It's just weird, you know? Knowing what we know, seeing what we've seen, and then coming here, watching all these people just living their normal lives." I nodded, understanding completely. "Like we're living in a different world." "Exactly." Megan was quiet for a moment, then added softly, "Sometimes I envy them. The not knowing." "Yeah, I agreed. But then I think about what's out there, what could happen if we weren't here to stop it, and I'm glad we know. Even if it's hard." Megan looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Look at you, all noble and heroic. You're really leaning into this chosen one thing, huh?" I threw a balled-up napkin at her, laughing. "Shut up. You're just as much a part of this as I am, remember? Guardian and guide, that's what Linda said." Yeah. Megan rolled her eyes, but I could see she was pleased. Our relationship had changed so much in such a short time. The rivalry, the pettiness, it all seemed so trivial now. We were in this together, for better or worse. As we left the mall, stepping out into the late afternoon sunlight, I felt a sudden surge of something. Not quite the power I'd been learning to control, but a sense of rightness, of purpose. "Hey, Megan," I said, pausing on the sidewalk. "Yeah? Thanks. For, everything. I don't think I could do this without you." She bumped her shoulder against mine, a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Right back at you, sis. We've got this." And in that moment, I believed her. Whatever was coming, Umbra, cosmic battles, senior prom, we would face it together. As a family, as a team. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, our new life became, well, life. Training and study were still a big part of our routine, but so were movie nights and family dinners. I went on my first date with Jake Sullivan, as it turned out, and managed to only think about interdimensional threats 3 or 4 times during the evening. Progress, right? There were still challenges, of course. Moments of doubt, of fear. Nights when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, visions of shadow creatures dancing behind my eyelids. But I wasn't facing those moments alone anymore. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, a normal family dinner, no codex or crystals in sight, I looked around at the faces of my family. Dad, his eyes tired but proud. Linda, her smile warm and encouraging. Megan, rolling her eyes at one of Dad's terrible jokes, but laughing anyway. And I realized something. Yes, our lives had changed dramatically. Yes, we were facing challenges most people couldn't even imagine. But we were facing them together. And somehow, against all odds, we were not just surviving, we were thriving. The future was still uncertain. The threat of the Umbra still loomed on the horizon. But as I sat there, surrounded by love and laughter, I knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, we were ready. Because we weren't just a family anymore. We were a team. Guardians of the light, protectors of the world. And together, there was nothing we couldn't face. As I helped clear the table after dinner, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The girl looking back at me wasn't the same one who had taken that first sip of mysterious tea all those months ago. She was stronger, wiser, more confident. She was Sarah, heir to an ancient legacy, wielder of incredible power. But she was also just Sarah, a teenager figuring out her place in the world. Both worlds. And you know what? I liked her. Both versions of her. As I turned away from the window, ready to join my family for our traditional post-dinner board game battle, I smiled to myself. The journey ahead might be difficult, might be dangerous. But it was my journey. Our journey. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next.